This is a video explainer for the Medway Safeguarding Children Partnership's Local Child Safeguarding Practice Review titled Julia. Welcome and thank you for setting aside time for this presentation. My name is Kirsty King and I'm the Medway Safeguarding Children Partnership's Practice Development Lead, and I'll be taking you through this presentation. This presentation will include a short explanation of what a local child safeguarding practice review is, the circumstances that led to this local child safeguarding practice review, the findings, good practice and recommendations from the review. The full report of Julia and a briefing can be found on the MSCP website. Before we start, please be aware that this presentation includes details of child death and neglect. Please take care of yourself, as the content may trigger feelings and emotions for you personally and professionally. You can stop the presentation at any time and come back to it when you feel ready. Before you start, make sure you have someone you can get in touch with if you feel you need support. This might be your line manager, a designated safeguarding lead, a colleague or a friend. Many employees have some form of wellbeing offer or service. You might want to check in with this. On the slide are details of a couple of organisations who can also provide support. Working Together to Safeguard Children 2023 sets out certain responsibilities for the statutory safeguarding partners when a child is seriously harmed or dies and abuse or neglect is known or suspected. Here in Medway, the statutory safeguarding partners are Medway Council, Kent Police and NHS Kent and Medway. These responsibilities include commissioning local child safeguarding practice reviews. The purpose of a local child safeguarding practice review, or LCSPR, is for agencies and individuals to learn lessons to improve the way in which they work, both individually and collectively, to safeguard and promote the welfare of children. They are often completed by independent reviewers. The reviews are not an inquiry into how a child died or was seriously harmed, or into who is culpable. These are matters for coroners and criminal courts to determine as appropriate. A local child safeguarding practice review is about the child, their experiences and our learning, and most importantly, the action we take as professionals individually and collectively as a result of this learning. I'm now going to provide a short summary of what we call the trigger event for this local child safeguarding practice review and a background to the family circumstances, including their contact with services. As a reminder, you can stop this presentation at any time. This child safeguarding practice review was commissioned in 2023 by the Medway Safeguarding Children's Partnership after the death of a 5-year-old child known in the report as Julia. Julia's family are of European nationality, and at the point of becoming a looked after child, Julia only spoke and understood her parents' language. Julia had been born prematurely at 30 weeks and subsequently contracted meningococcal sepsis with meningitis. This resulted in hemiplegia, muscle weakness of the left side. This resulted in strength and mobility issues, global developmental delay, and delayed speech and language. Julia was sadly found to have drowned in the bath after being left unsupervised. At the time of her death, Julia was in the care of the Medway Local Authority and had been living with her 4 siblings in a foster home provided by an independent fostering agency for 7 months. This was in another local authority area in Bexley. The children were placed as an emergency foster care placement following their being taken into police protection and then an emergency protection order being granted. The foster carer provided by the independent foster care agency was confident that they could care for the 5 children. Whilst the foster carer status allowed for such a placement and they was experienced with positive annual reviews, they were not a cultural match to the children, nor experienced with caring for a child with disabilities. During placement planning, Julia's mobility issues were not addressed in terms of needing safety equipment and that she was awaiting health appointments and assessments. There was a delay in some equipment such as stair gates, car seats and a pushchair for Julia being given. The individual risk assessment and safe care form for Julia did state that Julia is 4 years old and therefore the foster carer must ensure Julia is supervised at all times. We'll now move on to the findings from the review that sit across 3 practice themes. Again, you will hear about child neglect, so please do stop and take a break if you need to. Firstly, the matching process and placement for large sibling groups and children with complex needs. It's imperative that information about the children as part of the matching process is appropriately detailed and up to date. Appropriate safety equipment and beds need to be provided for each child with each need without delay. Risk assessments of children need to be adhered to and reflected upon in supervisions. The review also considered that professionals could take the opportunity outside of the statutory care planning processes to reflect together and identify any gaps in information, review documentations and the emergency placement, especially of those with large sibling groups. The form which requests placements, known as the ART form, should be shared with the foster carer, as the form in this case was very detailed and contained the history of the social care involvement, the concerns and reasons for requesting emergency protection order, and provided details of Julia's health and identified the challenges in her walking, delayed speech, and that a wheelchair was being made for her. It also stated that Julia needed support sitting upright and climbing stairs. The second theme of Julia's health condition and the health needs of looked after children placed out of area. There were delays in the initial health assessment process, which did not meet statutory requirements. Julia's initial health assessment was not informed by Medway Health Services, but appropriate referrals were made for her needs. It appears it was a start-again approach that lacked her historical health information. This delayed Julia receiving specialist support and delayed the EHCP process. Focus was on the complex care proceedings and not the lived experiences of the children, including Julia's health needs. Thirdly, the importance of race, ethnicity and culture. It was recognised that the foster placement was not a cultural match for the children. Records indicate there had been some consideration of the children's culture around food, but this was not detailed in the planning process for the children, and there was no consideration given to the children's language barriers outside of the children's services interactions. Agencies need to record explicit exploration of the family culture and the impact this may have and mean for the children's lived experiences. There is clearly learning for agencies on how responsive they were around the matching process and consideration of Julia's health and cultural needs. However, it is important to balance this with recognition that this review has identified many practitioners who were concerned, thoughtful and responsive to Julia and her siblings. Paperwork associated with the process of children going into care was detailed and did reflect the children's needs. The social worker completed an Art 1 form, which is a request for placement, and this was provided to the Access to Resources team, part of the Children's Commissioning function of the local authority. This form, as mentioned, was very detailed and provided the full history of the children's social care involvement, the concerns and the reasons for requesting an emergency protection order. Very importantly, it did provide details of Julia's health conditions, and it identified the challenges that Julia had in walking, Julia's delayed speech, and that she was waiting for a wheelchair to be made for her. It also stated that Julia needed support in sitting upright and climbing stairs, and would need a foster home which provided stair gates and safety equipment. The form, unfortunately, is not always shared routinely or in a timely way and with all parties that could have benefited from seeing it, and this has become a recommendation of the review. The commissioning and quality assurance process here is already thorough, but in discussion with the head of children's social care, the placements and the quality assurance program lead, they suggested that in the case of both emergency placements and with large sibling groups, that we could trigger a professional network meeting, and this could afford professionals the opportunity to review the original planning, meetings and discussions. It is clear that there is inevitably an impact of emergency placements made without planning, despite the effective practice of all practitioners involved. The report makes 13 recommendations for the Medway Safeguarding Children Partnership and individual agencies. The recommendations are set out in full in the report and in the briefing, and will be taken forward by the MSCP's Learning Lessons subgroup. While some of the recommendations are very specific and in relation to children in care, here are some points for you to consider and reflect on from the recommendations. In addition to the recommendations in this review, the MSCP has incorporated bath safety into their Safer Babies and Toddlers workstream, and professionals working with families should be sharing bath safety messages. The importance of full multi-agency working and timely transfer of records and information is a recurring learning point in reviews. Consider how well you are supported in your service to engage with partners. Do you know how to professionally challenge when engagement or information is not forthcoming? The terminology short term in relation to the placement of looked after children does not reflect the amount of time, but that the arrangement is not a formal long term approved placement. The use of the term in this review may have impacted the provision of items for the children if it was believed that they would be moving placements imminently. Professionals must consider and record the detail of how ethnicity and cultural needs are recognised and are being addressed. This is particularly necessary when language may be a presenting barrier in relation to accessing services. Cultural competence is defined as the ability and confidence of all professionals to explore and ask questions about the cultural context and practices of the children and families that they work with. This includes understanding and addressing racism and discrimination and recognising that cultural identity will be treated with understanding and respect. Agencies need to record explicit exploration of the family culture and the impact this may mean for the children's lived experience. Thank you for listening to this presentation. If it has raised some difficult feelings or emotions for you, please get in touch with your line manager, a designated safeguarding lead, a colleague or a friend. As a reminder, here are a couple of organisations that can provide support. There are many ways you can keep in touch with the Medway Safeguarding Children's Partnership. One of these ways is to receive the bi-monthly bulletin. Please use the email address on the screen to request a copy. You can also check in on our website and follow us on our social media channels.